Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace be upon everyone. Welcome back to my channel. And if this is your first time here, welcome. So today we're going to be working on the question on the screen, which is the quadratic equation for x squared minus 36 equals 0. And we're going to be solving this question with the quadratic formula. The reason why I picked solving this question using the quadratic formula is for students to know that whenever you're given a question and you think of using the factorization method and it's difficult to use or is impossible to use in some questions, or you're trying to do the completing the square method, like in this case, the value of b, so the term that has the x is not present in this question, hence the value of b equals 0. So we can't use the completing the square method here either. But we can use the square root method. But what if we couldn't use the square root method? How would we solve a question like this? So the first thing you're going to do is for you to compare this equation with the standard form of a quadratic equation, which is just ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. We know when we compare both equations, we know that the value of a is going to equals 4. So the coefficient of x squared is 4. And then the value of b is just going to be the coefficient of the term of x. But the x term does not show here, is not present in this equation. So what that means is that the value of b is actually equals to 0. And then you have c, which is just a constant in the quadratic equation. And this equation has a constant. So c equals negative 36. Right? So you have x. So I'm writing the quadratic formula now, equals negative b plus or minus the square root b squared minus 4ac over 2a. Now we have the value of a to be positive 4, the value of b to be 0, and the value of c to be negative 36. Well, since we're working with the quadratic formula, we're just going to input it, substitute all of the values, and solve for x. So you have x equals negative 0, negative 0, plus or minus b squared, so that's just 0 squared, minus 4 times positive 4, because it's 4ac, right? And the value of a is just positive 4, times c, which is just negative 36. So all of that information divided by 2a, so that's 2 times 4. So equals to 0 plus or minus, because negative 0 is 0. 0 squared, we don't have to write that down. We're just going to skip that. Now, this is one of the important details in this particular solution. You have a negative here, right? Then you have a positive here. And then you have a negative as well. So negative times a positive, that's a negative. Negative times a negative, that's a positive. So negative, positive, negative is just positive. So you're going to have a positive under the square root, which is what we like, right? So 4 times 4 is 16. And then you also have 36. So you're going to have 16 times 36. So you know that like with this now, you may think, oh, let me do 16 times 36, right? So 16 times 36, and you get the square root of that divided by 2 times 4. But you don't have to do it this way. One way you can definitely do this is for you to actually look at what is inside the square root and see if there's a way for you to break down the information. And by doing that, you would need to work with radicals, right? So radicals in the sense that you have 16 times 36. You can break down that particular part of the question and you have x equals plus or minus the square root of 16 times the square root of 36. Remember when you did radicals, like if they give you the radical of a times b, it's the same thing as the radical of a times the radical of b, or the root of a times the root of b. So that's just basically the trick that we're doing in the previous page. So all of that divided by 2 times 4 is just 8. So what you end up with is, well, you have plus or minus, and then you have the square root of 16 is 4, times the square root of 36 is just simply 6. So all of that information divided by 8. So you have 2 here, 4, right? 2 here, 3, and then you have 4 here, 1, and just 4 here, 1. So what you end up with is x equals plus or minus 3. Sorry, x equals plus or minus 3, not x equals plus or minus 3. So x equals plus or minus 3. So just to rewrite that, the answers will be x equals -3 and x also equals +3, which makes sense, right? Because since you're dealing with a quadratic equation, you're basically dealing with an equation where you're supposed to have two values of x, right? Because you have x squared and the exponent or power of x is 2, so you're supposed to expect to have two values of x. So this is basically how you use the quadratic formula to solve this question. If you want to see a shortcut method on how I solve this, make sure you watch the video showing on the end screen. I wish you guys all the very best. Make sure you leave suggestions on what you want to see. And Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.